Okay, welcome everyone. Good to see you this Thursday afternoon. We are doing something a little bit different because 20 minutes ago I turned on my computer and tried to check the link. Wasn't working. My computer was not happy. So Ileana rushed to the rescue, and so I'm doing this from Ileana's iPad. Is everything look and sound okay? You
Perfect.
can hear and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, we're starting session 2. I'm looking here. Where is the camera? Oh, okay. I'm just kind of looking at all of you. This is a different thing doing the iPad. Anyway. So I'm excited again to cover this topic. I spent way more time than I thought kind of setting up the context last time. I spent a lot of time when I looked back at it. You know, we talk about we're one with the universe, right? The universe is always moving, dynamic. Boy, did I go down a wormhole explaining the science of all that. But what I didn't say that I wanted to say, you know, just take a big breath right now. Take a big inhale. You know some of that oxygen you just breathed? So I'm here on the East Coast of the United States. That air I just was breathing 4 or 5 days ago could have been in Sudan or Saudi Arabia or Egypt, because that's what happens with our atmosphere in the jet stream. And when you exhale, guess what? A little part of you in 4 or 5 days is going to be maybe providing some plant or animal nutrition on the other side of the planet. So next time you breathe, you can just think you are really breathing with everybody. So let's see here. Oh, I'm going to do my disclaimer again. I said I would do it each time, so you're going to have to hear this sentence 4 times. I am not a medical doctor. And I am not offering medical advice. But I am going to discuss evidence-based self-care practices that are documented in peer-reviewed scientific literature, that we understand present mechanisms that, in combination, help to reduce inflammation and reduce pain. So I'm going to continue to unpack that. Today will be some science and then some applications of the 3 orders of body-mind awareness. And just for planning ahead, I'm envisioning 2 sessions beyond today, maybe 4 in total, where the next 2 weeks, we're going to focus on the 14 exercises in living with the wind at your back that I have kind of customized for someone who is seeking to manage their pain. So we'll go through that just so that you, as a Ki Aikido person, if you ever want to use this, then I'm taking all this time just to say, you know what, it works for me. I'd like to share it with a lot of people. In fact, this week, I've been doing nothing but thinking about this managing pain. On Monday, I was a part of, get this, the world's largest webinar, as I understand it. So far, there are 450,000 people registered for this webinar that I was speaking at on Monday. And not that there were that many people in the audience at all. This is a conference that's going 24/7 for 12 days. But I was talking about managing pain, and I had to be extremely disciplined because I only had 50 minutes. So I'm enjoying this much more, just to look at your faces and say, okay, we don't have to be so rushed. So let me start like this. Before we start, I'm going to pick up where we left off. But does anyone have any question that they haven't, that they'd like to ask before I even get started here today? No? Okay. All right, great. Okay, let's see. What should we do, Rich? Let's go to the presentation from last week, because I only got to the very beginning of it. Okay, this is Uji. Last time, I won't go into this at all, other than to say, you know, if you really want to understand all 4 of these sequentially, then I would encourage you to go back and look at part 1. Here, I was making the point that I don't refer to this as pain management, but managing pain. And I was liking this to being time or being o'clock. But that's in the last session. So let's just keep going, Rich. You know, as I've been thinking about this past week, how blessed I was. But if you were to look up Edward O. Wilson and Marvin Minsky, it's pretty amazing to me. But the main point to share is that here in the late 1980s, I found myself at the epicenter of discussions of neuroplasticity. Next slide, please. And so I applied those learnings, both from Stephen Jay Gould on neoteny and patomorphic morphology, and from Marvin Minsky, the one who came up with the whole concept of neural networks, which is what AI is. It's when we talk about learning machines, artificial intelligence, those programs in AI are based upon what Marvin Minsky discovered, those neural networks. So I guess I'm just saying it's pretty amazing. But next slide, please, Rich. So by 1990, I was writing this on neuroplasticity in the journal Human Evolution. Now, Rich, I really am kind of at a loss here because I want to hold up a book, but I don't know how to do it. Is this, you can see that? Okay, because I can't see anything. But neurodarwinism, just think of it. This is Gerald Elderman, won a Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology. He and Marvin Minsky were like my heroes at this time. But I just want you to get this idea that natural selection is working at the level of the neuron, and we have known that for 30 years. This is why the study of children was so important to understand this notion of neuroplasticity, which is also relevant to this whole notion of how we acquire culturally dependent worldviews. So as we go through this today, I guess the thesis I want you to think about is, with repetition and practice, it is possible to literally change neural networks. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about the pattern of receptors in the postsynaptic terminal. So this is really kind of interesting since I can't see anything. Let's do the next slide. What the heck? All right. I think we didn't cover this last time, right, Rich? Okay. So I did my master's degree in early Buddhism, and I was fortunate at the University of Hawaii. The person that I did my master's degree under was a gentleman from Sri Lanka named David Klupahana. And he was, at the time, he's now passed away, but he was the world's living authority on the earliest Buddhist texts, the Nikayas. He also served on my doctoral committee. And his whole life was dedicated to this notion of explaining to the world what he considered to be the central philosophy of early Buddhism, was this notion in Pali of praticitsamutpada, or praticitsamuppanna dhamma. It's a theory of causation that suggests that all things in this universe, not just the physical universe, but all things in this universe, mental phenomena, emotional phenomena, spiritual phenomena, karmic phenomena, are all causally, it says dependent, but it means interdependent. For one thing to occur in this world, there's a myriad of causes behind it. And as I said, this is the central philosophy of early Buddhism. What's interesting to me is this is going to be kind of the transition to jump into some of this anatomy. But let me just posit to you this way. If I read the second and the fourth line, from the arising of this, that arises. And then on the cessation of this, that ceases. what I'm going to suggest is, imagine in the first two lines, you just put a little plus by that side, indicating like a positive ion charge. And for the second two lines, you put a little minus, like it doesn't exist. That's a negative ion charge. And the balance of those positive and negative charges is what is going to determine whether or not a neuron fires or not. And the significance of this is amazing, in my opinion. And I just want to teach enough of it so that you get kind of a handle on it. So to do that, let me set up a video that Rich will play here in just a second. It's on the 5 phases of nociceptive pain. Oh, there you all are. You're back. I was in a black hole there. Anyway, I do enjoy seeing your faces. So the 5 phases are transduction, conduction, transmission, perception, and modulation. And as you view this video, it's only like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But I want you to pay particular attention to transmission and modulation. And then we'll unpack that a little bit further. So Rich, if you can play the video. Again, transmission and modulation. Listen for those in particular.
Nociceptive pain. Nociceptive pain occurs as a result of the activation of the nociceptive system by noxious stimuli, inflammation, or disease. Nociceptive pain proceeds through 5 phases: transduction, conduction, transmission, perception, and modulation. Nociceptive pain originates in the nociceptors, which are highly specialized primary sensory neurons found primarily in the skin or joints or the walls of organs. These receptors convert noxious stimuli into electrical current through a process called transduction. The current is then conducted along the nociceptor axons to their cell bodies, located in the dorsal root ganglion in the spinal cord, and then to their central terminals located in the dorsal horn. Here, the electrical impulses initiate neurotransmitter release from nociceptor central terminals, which relay the signal across synapses to the dorsal horn neurons. Greater stimulus intensities are associated with the release of neuropeptides, including substance P, from central terminals of C fibers. Substance P, acting via neurokinin receptors located on dorsal horn neurons, generates a greater postsynaptic response and enhances the activity of NMDA receptors. The signal is then relayed via ascending nociceptive pathways to higher centers in the brain, where it is perceived as pain. Ascending nociceptive transmissions are modulated by inhibitory or facilitatory control systems in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. The process of inhibition and facilitation is regulated by neurons projecting from the nucleus raphe magnus in the lower brainstem. Nociceptive signals are transmitted through descending projections in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. Facilitation serves to provide warning of tissue injury and encourages protective behaviors, such as fight or flight responses, while inhibition may serve to provide analgesia at times of danger so that pain does not compromise function.
Okay, I think most of you saw that 8-minute video that I asked you to review beforehand. And so you've seen twice now that the process of pain perception has 2 tracks, the ascending track and the descending track. And in the dorsal horn, in the substantia gelatinosa, are where there are neurotransmitters everywhere. But specifically, let me just give you a definition. What is a neurotransmitter anyway, since they're key in this process? Neurotransmitters are the signaling molecules used at the synapses to pass a signal from a neuron to its target cell. signals that cross the synaptic cleft or junction is where polarization is key. Here, those neurotransmitters might excite excitatory ions, or they may have the opposite effect, inhibitory ions that converge to either fire or not, thus passing along a threshold of polarization and depolarization that will occur like a wave down the axon. Now, I'm going to show you another 4-minute video because I want to take it even deeper into what is an action potential and how does that actually work. The thesis I'm going to share is that our attention, our structured intentionality over time has the possibility of either contributing to excitatory or inhibitory functions. So inhibitory is going to create a kind of analgesic, okay? But in reality, it's not like some sort of salve that makes you feel good. The analgesic is it's going to inhibit the firing of neurons, which is going to therefore not allow that signal to be passed back up the spinal thalamic tract. So you have an injury, let's say it's in my ankle, okay? One of the longest, well, I think it is the longest axon in our body, actually goes from the lower spine all the way to your foot. So in my case, that long axon is exactly what we're focused on. And that is in my personal case. On the other hand, if you have a habit in your mind of expectation of pain, and by the way, in this conference that I was just at, I heard some fascinating talks on persons who have suffered traumatic experiences, and those traumatic experiences are now in their nervous system. Maybe, Crystal, you're familiar with this in terms of your psychotherapy practice, but for me, that was new to understand, trauma from pain or trauma from a past event. If it gets repeated again and again and again, certain associations in the brain, literally, that is exacerbating, it's creating an excitatory response. And yet in your own kind of therapy and efforts to heal, what you really want is an inhibitory response. Anyway, I'm just seeing all these connections all over the place all of a sudden. So what happens there in that synaptic cleft is some neurotransmitters like enkephalin, like serotonin, serve to kind of calm the polarization of the cell membrane. So what I decided to do is to show a clip. It's 4 minutes, which is going to let you go to school a little bit on the action potential, because while we'll talk for the rest of today and the next 2 times, to understand the effect that you're really going after, that science is telling us will in fact reduce as felt pain, I just really want you to understand it, or at least point you to resources so that you can understand it better. So if you could roll that, Rich. By the way, this is just the last 3 minutes of a longer video, or 4 minutes.
Now, action potentials succumb to what's called the all or none law. And what that means is that an action potential will occur or will not, and it doesn't depend on how much of the stimulus it gets. It depends on if you hit that threshold or not. And so once we hit that threshold, we can move towards it, we can move away from that voltage. But once we hit negative 55 millivolts, we're going to have an action potential, and that action potential is going to look exactly the same. Now, in this diagram right here, we have the 3 different potentials that I'm talking about in this video. At the beginning, we have the resting potential. Remember, that's contributed to by the permeability of the membrane to different ions. We then have the action potential, that rapid depolarization and repolarization of the neuron. But what's going on in here, we have graded potentials. In other words, the potential is moving towards or away from that threshold. And so if we think about what's going on there, to really understand that, we're getting information from other nerves. There are synapses here, and those synapses are releasing neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters are moving across the synapse, and they're opening up a new form of channel that's important when we talk about graded potentials. Those are chemically graded channels. And so these neurotransmitters are going to dock with proteins on the postsynaptic side of those neurons, and what they'll do is they'll open it up. What does that do? Well, it depends on what type of neurotransmitter it is and what type of receptor it is. There are some that are going to be excitatory. And if we look back at our graded potentials, excitatory means that they're moving us towards the threshold, towards that all or none action potential to occur. What's the easiest way to do that? If we open up the channel and we have a channel that allows sodium to run in, that's going to depolarize us and it's going to move us to that threshold, just like those sodium gated channels are going to do. Now we also have inhibitory neurotransmitters and receptors. What are they going to do? They're going to move away from that threshold. What's the easiest way to do that is to have a receptor that's going to allow potassium to rush out, or you could allow chloride to come into that neuron itself, and it's going to push us away from that threshold. So we can think of a neuron as an analog portion and a digital portion. So since it's all or none down here, where you're either going to have the action potential or not, so it's like a 1 or a 0. But if we look on this side of the neuron where the cell body is and the dendrites are, we're getting a lot of information from neurotransmitters of neurons that are attached to the dendrites and the cell body of this neuron itself. Some of those are excitatory. What they're doing is depolarizing that neuron. They're increasing the voltage, pushing us closer to that threshold. And some of those are going to be inhibitory. They're pushing us away from it. And so it's the summation of all of those signals that's telling that neuron to either fire an action potential if we hit -55 or not. And so that is the all or none law. And so in summary, what is the resting potential? It's -70 millivolts. It's where a neuron is sitting. It has a potential to do work. It's established by the permeability of the membranes and the sodium-potassium pump. We then moved on to the graded potential, and that's based on all the neurotransmitters that we're getting from connected neurons. And then if we hit that -55, we're going to have an opening of those sodium ion channels, and we're going to have an all or none action potential that runs down to the neuron. So that's the action potential, and I hope that was helpful.
Okay, so I don't know if I lost you entirely there, but you get the idea that it's going to be a go, no-go, and there are ways in which to influence that no-go. What that'll do is where the first order neuron meets the second order neuron in the substantia gelatinosa. If it doesn't pass along that firing, then that's going to inhibit that transition or the continuation of that pain signal going up the ascending pathway, where it'll synapse again to a third order neuron in the thalamus before then going to the somatosensory cortex, where you actually feel pain. Okay, can we go back to the slides, Rich? So back to my kind of story. Remember, it was the late 1980s and 1990 that I was doing all this work. So let's progress 15 years later. Okay, yes, 15 years later, Newsweek now publishes this publishes the magazine with the title article, again, focusing on the developmental structures of children. So this is 15 years after the fact. We were talking about neoteny as being that vehicle to help us understand the development of culturally dependent worldviews. The exciting part here were advances in neuroimaging, which we did not have when I was doing this work in the late 1980s. So with these advances on neuroimaging, that's what really made a lot of this take off. So in the same year, next slide, please, National Geographic jumps on the same bandwagon, almost imitates the same kind of photo, just to get in the public's mind the idea that we are beginning to study in more detail, as it says on this magazine cover, what is in your mind. Okay, if I could go to the regular seeing everybody. So I won't take a lot of time, but I'm just going to read some titles of things just so you know it's there. So that was 2005. By 2013, one of these seminal articles that I like to refer to, in 2013, the National Institute of Health reviewed 183 peer-reviewed studies. These are the citations in this particular review article. The title of the article is Cognitive and Emotional Control of Pain and Its Disruption in Chronic Pain. Okay, so 2013. So that's 7 years ago already. Let me just give you some other examples of some of these titles, for example. Okay, here's one from the journal Neuroimage. Expectation violation and attention to pain jointly modulate neurogain in the somatosensory cortex. Highlights of this article: expectation and attention influence how pain is processed and perceived. Pain-related signals are processed through a hierarchy of somatosensory and frontal parietal regions. Expectation violation and attention to pain modulate intrinsic and extrinsic connectivity in the somatosensory hierarchy. Expectation is key here. When you're expecting, you have chronic persistent pain, and you're expecting that pain to kick in when you do certain movements, that's creating an excitatory response. That is, your reactiveness, because of your expectation, is already creating changes in your neurobiology. Another one, cerebral signature for pain perception and its modulation. This is, let me come back to that. Another journal, the neuroanatomy of long-term meditators. So they're getting pretty specific here. In the journal Cortex, attention to pain, a neurocognitive perspective on attentional modulations of pain in neuroimaging studies. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of literature here. And one of the things that I want to highlight here is as follows. This comes from the journal Neuron. The title of this article is the cerebral signature for pain perception and its modulation. An important couple of sentences here I want to read. Pain is a conscious experience, an interpretation of nociceptive input influenced by memories, emotional, pathological, genetic, and cognitive factors. Resultant pain is not necessarily related linearly to the nociceptive drive or input. Neither is it solely for the vital protection of functions. This is especially true in a chronic pain state. Okay, to explain that, if we could go back to the deck, Rich. Okay, so what we're talking about is chronic pain and self-care. So next slide, please. So what I want to share with you is what's called the Biopsychosocial Model. And what did I do with those notes? Well, I can't find it. I got so much stuff here. What I want to do is give credit to actually 2 former Aikido students that are both researchers in rehab medicine. Anne Vanderwinkle from Minnesota is an assistant professor in the Department of Rehab Medicine at the University of Minnesota. She's the director of a lab that's called the Brain, Mind, Body Lab. And she's very much focused on this whole notion of attention and its effects on our neurobiology. She works with people in rehab areas, specifically focusing on those who have had strokes. And then Jim Eubanks at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, just today, they're launching a new pilot study called prehabilitation. So for people undergoing spinal surgery, they're now having a week of prehabilitation to prepare them mentally, physically, emotionally for the spinal surgery that they're about ready to have. In any event, think of it now, back to my work, our culture, the environment in which we live, not only affects the entire development of the brain, but it's going to affect your as felt perception of pain. Let me explain that briefly. Next slide, please. Okay, so what do we mean by biological, psychological, and social? So if you just kind of read along the middle there with me. So biological, trauma is going to have an effect in your neurobiology, infection, illness, cancer pain is different. Psychological, if you have high fear, if you have anxiety, depression, if you have trouble sleeping, all of this is going to exacerbate your as felt feeling of pain. And of course, social matters, your work history, your family history, all of those things in combination affect your as felt pain. But I think most people just think, oh, pain is like, if you break your ankle, then pain is from your ankle to your head. But what we're recognizing is the interplay of persons and other persons and their environment. As Toy Sensei said, we are one with the universe. And our whole physiology and our neurophysiology is a reflection of that past history. Specifically when it comes to pain, next slide, please. Let's start here on the left where it says pain perception and then times dispositional factors. That's just what we've talked about. So it's going to be the pain perception times the dispositional factors. That's going to be the expression of pain. If you have low fear, if you have activities in daily life, as you see there on the left that all look, all great, then your expression of pain is going to be controlled and modulated, inhibitory. However, if you're what's referred to as catastrophizing pain, you have that expectation, that future expectation, if you do this, it will result in pain, creates a habituated high fear. And in the literature here, and in the measurements, they call that fear avoidance. That's what causes depression. That's what leads to disability. That's what causes a fear of exercise and movement. You just go into your shell. And what's happening is you are, remember that neurodarwinism? You're actually, through the repetition of these kinds of thoughts and feelings, you're actually enhancing the excitatory response of those postsynaptic gateways, if you will. It's referred to as the gateway or the gate theory of pain. But I just wanted to express that, and I wanted to thank Anne in Minnesota for these last three slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so, this was really for that other talk, but all the things that you would normally think of as taking care of yourself, relaxing, exercising, stress management, working on your relationships, fitness, mindset, all of those things in combination work for as felt pain. So it seems to me, as Ki Aikido practitioners, that we're in the driver's seat in a lot of different ways to help people who are suffering from pain. I mean, that's why I'm doing all this. It's like, okay, I've learned something about this, studied this, and we are the kind of people that can really help people with this. And I'm going to explain why I'm saying that in just a minute. So next slide, please. So we always talk about experiential learning. That's what we do every time we teach the 4 basic principles. We're saying, don't believe it because I'm saying it, or because our teacher, Toy Sensei, was this great man. You're setting up conditions, scientific conditions, if you're Tohei Sensei, where there's only one variable. So we are doing this kind of experiential learning. And what I'm going to suggest to you is with this kind of learning, we're learning skills that can really help to manage as felt pain. Next slide, please. I'm going to do these next slides rather quickly. So if you think differently, you're going to get a different result. That's what I always teach when I walk people through the 4 basic principles for the first time. If you think up here on the top of your head, key test, you're going to get one experience. If you keep 1 point, in other words, you're just thinking differently, key test, you're going to get a completely different result. For people who are suffering from chronic pain, when you just begin and you start teaching them keep 1 point, as I did in 2018 and 2019, they go crazy in a positive way. That is the people that I was teaching, because they recognized, holy cow, once I understand a little bit of the neuroscience and I understand how true it is when I think differently, I can suddenly get all the stability and balance and power. And it's like, whoa, these were all people 70 years old and older. And we're just, head over heels excited about this. One of the big takeaways from them was just balance, and they worry. Some people worry about balance who are getting on in years. Not Shaner Sensei, because he's a super special guy. But anyway, next slide, please. I can't see anything, by the way. This is pretty bizarre. I'm talking. Okay, so we talk about sweetness, right? So if you talk about sweetness, or if you talk about managing pain, if we can create experiences that'll be different, it'd be like giving people an M&M and saying that's what sweetness is, rather than just trying to talk about it. So next slide, please. So we do this when we teach people how to use their whole iceberg. I don't need to talk about this to this group, because this is what we do. When you use your mind and body together, you're using the power of both your physical body, which you can see, which is above the surface of the water, but you're also tapping that mind. And when you have a captive audience of people who are doing whatever they can do to manage chronic pain, this is going to make a big influence, or at least my limited experience sharing these with people, this makes a big difference. Next slide, please. So the skill of focusing, when we teach people to keep 1 point, and suddenly now they have a very different experience, I want you to keep that in mind, because focusing, the skill of focus, is something that we teach in key development practices, and that is one of the skills that you need. When I was doing this talk earlier this week, to that conference, think of it, 450,000 people registered for this conference, and it was all on embodiment. That is, all kinds of different modalities where people use the body for various therapies, dance therapy, any modality that was using the physical body. And I recognized that probably 80% of the speakers at this conference, they teach 3 skills that we teach: how to focus, how to relax, and how to connect. So let's see that in the next slide, please. We teach relaxation all the time, right? We show it when we say, or I'm always talking about F equals MA, right? Force equals mass times acceleration. You can change the acceleration of your hand and your body through relaxation. And there are other modalities too, teaching people how to relax. So that, to me, this is a toolkit: focusing, relaxing, and the next one is connecting. So obviously in the martial art of Ki Aikido, we're teaching people how to connect both from the beginning, connect with ourselves, like unbendable arm, right? So this is a slide where I would be teaching unbendable arm. But the idea is first, we have to connect with ourselves. We have to harmonize our mind and body, and then we can project our intention, which, as you're beginning to recognize now, is really what this is all about. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so you know what, Rich? This is not the deck that we're supposed to be using. That's okay. Okay. So we're familiar with these 3 orders of body-mind awareness. I don't even think I have to review it with this group. We know that 3rd order awareness is where there's many overlapping vectors. We have that monkey mind. We're going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. So our mind is just moving all the time. And it becomes difficult for us to learn how to focus, but a 2nd order intention to be able to sustain a singular focus. Well, just imagine how practical this is. We learned how to do this through breathing, through meditation, and other modalities in our training. But just think of it now, when you're catastrophizing, if you will, or you're just feeling bad because it hurts, you're in a third order body-mind awareness, and you can't get your mind off of all the different associations of your pain. But by learning how to focus your attention and sustain that attention, we're going to now help persons who are suffering from chronic pain to redirect their attention to different things. And over time, what that's going to do from a selection, a Darwinian selection process at the level of the neuron, this is going to change our excitatory or facilitatory reactions, that is, that will promote the action potential of nerve firings, or by being less reactive, then we're going to be able to shift our focus and over time habituate inhibitory responses to those particular nerve stimuli. Now, note that it's going to be localized. If you have persistent pain, it's going to be in a certain part of your body. In my case, it's the ankle. So it's possible to inhibit function in one part of your body, and the rest of your body is still going to be processing your responses to pain in the normal ways, which you need. I mean, it's evolutionary and evolutionarily important for us to have an important pain response for our survival. I mean, pain is telling you something important. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, not yet. So first order mode, it may not be technically really first order, but in the literature, they talk about just developing non-reactiveness. Just like in cognitive behavioral therapy, they teach people to just watch your thoughts without judgment. In the same way, as you approach a non-thetic response, what you're doing is reducing your reactivity to those pain stimuli. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let me introduce you to a concept here, the three elements. So in the exercises that I'm going to show you over the next 2 weeks, you're going to see a theme of identify, direct, and sustain. The first thing you have to do is identify. That is, you have to notice. That's what we train. We train to be mindful. We train to notice. But if you're in pain, what you really want to do is help the person to begin to unpack their reactions to pain. They may be unconscious. They may not even be aware of it yet. But by identifying their reactions to pain, only then can they do the second point, which is to direct their mind towards other daily life activities. So there's notice, identify, then there's direct, because you recognize maybe you're caught up in third order debilitating reactions to pain. And then finally, you want to sustain those outcomes. So by learning how to sustain your focus, you're developing strategies to improve literally your neural response over time. Okay, so those are the elements, and you'll see them again and again and again. So next slide, please. So let's tie those elements to the three orders of body-mind awareness. So again, in third order, you've got these complex overlapping vectors. That's what you want to do. You're in third order, so you want to notice, identify, and accept. You're asking yourself, how do I feel? Where is my mind when I'm caught up in the experience of my as-felt pain? Then the second order, again, can I choose to direct my mind to where I want to go? So imagine you have a tenshoku related to, or a personal development affirmation related to your efforts to manage pain. You want to be able to change the direction of your mind, something we do in Aikido all the time. How about just Happo Waza or Zengo Waza? That's what we're doing. We're focusing this way and then we're focusing the other way. So we are definitely developing that skill. And then finally, first order, can you learn to sustain and maintain this? That is, can you maintain non-reactivity? Can you be synthetically neutral. That is, stop positing a thesis when it comes to your pain. Let's see how this unfolds. Next slide, please. Okay, so the 3 skills that I mentioned, you can apply the 3 elements for each skill. When you want to focus, first you have to understand where is your mind, right? That's like 5th cue. That's what Toi Sensei says. Where is your mind? That's how we train all the time. Perfect adaptation of key principles to this kind of modality of trying to figure out how can we use key principles to strategize our ability to manage pain. Well, then you're going to direct your attention. Remember, attention is what all these studies that in neuroscience, what they're focusing on, because attention is that directing our experience. Just jumping down, you can see the same thing. Where do you hold tension? When you figure that out, can you change and redirect from tension to relaxation? Well, that's no different than us just asking people to recognize, does it look like I have tension in my shoulders? Oh, thank you for telling me. Yes, now I know what to do. Just relax. So same thing can be said for connection. Now you might be wondering, where does connection fit? But remember, if you are catastrophizing your pain, you're going into a shell. You don't want to exercise. You have fear of movement. They call it fear avoidance. And suddenly you shut down, you stop exercising, and you kind of begin to withdraw in terms of your interpersonal relationships. You just withdraw into your pain. So by helping people to identify what's going on with their connection with others, if they can respect and align with other people, that is, they're directing their mind differently. And then if they can sustain that, lo and behold, you're going to be improving the quality of their life. Next slide, please. So by developing these skills, you're going to develop strategies for managing pain. You're going to reduce your dependence on opioids if you're taking them. And by the way, in my classes in 2018 and 19, dramatic reduction in opioids. Some gave them up entirely. Others who were taking a ton reduced them by more than half. And you're going to increase the quality of life living with pain. You're going to recognize that you as a person are not your pain. Pain is an experience that you have that can be managed. Next slide, please. Sorry. So what I want to say is we're all about daily practice. So the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about those 14 exercises, which if we do all the time, will lead to new behaviors, which will be new habits, all because we're using the skills of focusing, relaxation, and connection. But what is really exciting is the idea of developing some sort of empirical performance tracking. Now, this is self-reporting. I understand that, but you can do pre and post testing to really create some evidence that the persons who, in my case, we did 5 or 6 weeks. First time we did 5 weeks, second time 6 weeks, for 2 hours once a week. So 2 hours and then for 5 weeks or 6 weeks. And we pre-tested people and post-tested people. So let's see what kind of questions there are here. Well, you know what? Maybe we should do this, Rich. Let me pause because maybe we'll start next time with the metrics before we get into the exercise. Let me just, so we have time. Is there anything that I've said, and I apologize for what might be disjointed. It was definitely disjointed in my head because I'm doing this from Ileana's iPad and I can't see you and whatnot. But does anyone have any questions, since we only have like 6 minutes left? And I've been throwing a ton at you. Okay.
I guess I would just like to ask or make the obvious question that the pain you're talking about is pain that it's no longer informative because it's not pain that is informing you of something new or different. It's pain that you live with that nothing has helped you recover from. You're not ignoring your pain. You're learning how to live with a pain that hasn't found solution yet. Is that correct?
Yes. And we don't have time to explain this, but I am right now investigating the difference between nociceptive pain and neuropathic pain, cancer pain. There's different kinds of pains. But to your point, whether it's pain from some traumatic injury, like in my case, it's the pain doesn't need to warn me of an incoming danger. I think that's what you're saying. But my whole body is still, that equipment of my pain receptivity is still very much intact. But when it comes to the pain that I experience literally with every step that I take, there's no reason to not only not catastrophize it, but I don't even think about it. I have to actually direct my attention. Now, sometimes it just aches and it gets swollen, and well, you know, I get kiatsu in my ankle from you and Alina and Chase in particular. And that's the one thing that really allows it to release. But in my case, it's muscular skeletal pain. And so that's the kind that I'm most familiar with. And that is also the kind that I was working with my two, you know, kind of pilot groups in 2018 and 2019.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the metrics, I won't go into it now because I don't want to just rush over it. And maybe it'll be the case that you're not really interested in the metrics. I am, because what I'd like to do, you know, I want to give it away for free. Like, you know, it's helped me. And key principles are a wonderful way to learn the skills of focus, relaxation, and connection. And I know the world out there is oh, I see Kirsten. Yeah, that's interesting. On your iPad, I actually saw Kirsten's chat there. That's interesting. Yeah, so I think the world out there is interested in metrics. And so, and again, it's self-reporting. So some people will say, well, it's just self-reporting, right? But it's still self-reporting. If it means your as experience of pain has been considerably reduced, then I think that's really important. It's interesting too. Next week, I'll go into those metrics. There's some metrics for the skill of focus, some metrics for the skill of relaxation, some metrics for the skill of connection. But also, I'm going to show you that these metrics are tied to the traditional rehab medicine people who have their own metrics for studying pain. Fear avoidance is one, satisfaction of life is another, pain intensity is another. And so what I wanted to do is like, well, I don't need to make up new metrics. Let's just go find out what are the scientists, what are the metrics that they're using, and what questions can we ask that are applicable to the skills that we're teaching: focus, relaxation, and connection. Well, I apologize if today's was a little more disjointed, but I see we're coming up on the time, and next week, what I'll do is I'll send in advance the 14 exercises. They're the same exercises in Living with the Wind at Your Back, but I've modified them. It was amazing how easy it was, because I wrote the exercises, and then I recognized when I was looking at the exercises for managing pain, it was like, oh, looks like you wrote those exercises for yourself. Very easy to adjust. And then Matthew, I'll work with you on how we can display. Remember how you displayed those cards, I think on the fourth part of Saikontan? I've got cards for managing pain, but I also want to display the whole exercise. So I may have to, I'll give them to you in advance, because that's going to be more like a Word document that's full text. So I don't know how we're going to display that, but I trust that you'll help me figure out how to do that between now and next Thursday. Well, this has been kind of different, hasn't it? You know, talking about managing pain, but I do appreciate your attention. I can't see, I can only see a very few of you, so it's different than on my computer. Hopefully I'll figure out what's up by next week. Any parting words from anybody? No? Okay. Rich, thank you very much. Matthew, thank you for all that you do all the time. Thank you, those of you who are coming in from different parts of the country and even the world. Thank you, Crystal. I like the clap. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the week. I look forward to seeing you and continuing this. I love you very much. Thank you.